Is the cure for our nation's economic problems in some ways worse than the problems themselves? Well, that's the question that's been debated recently. That is increasing government involvement, increasing government spending to try to fix our economic problems going to end up being worse than the problems themselves? Well, to try to get at the American public's feelings about this issue, we just finished asking Americans to tell us how worried they were about a fairly long series of economic issues and issues that relate to the cures themselves. Now let's look at the top of the list of all those that we ask Americans about. No question about it, unemployment is number one. There is a great deal of concern about unemployment. 87% of Americans are worried about that, and that's clearly a problem. Also, Americans are concerned about the rising cost of health care. That's germane, of course, to the Obama administration's efforts now to try to reform health care. But look at what's tied for number 3 on that list, and that is concern about the increasing federal budget deficit. So we have almost as much worry on the part of the American public about the deficit as we do the problems of the unemployment rate and health care. Also notice that there's concern about state governments being able to balance their budgets. That's up there tied with concern about the deficit. Some of the other reforms that Americans, at least some Americans, had expressed concern about in previous surveys, increasing government regulation of business and industry, and the fact that the federal government's now more involved in owning business and industries. But as you see here, although a majority of Americans say they worry about those issues, they're basically at the bottom of the list. 58% of Americans say they're worrying about the increased regulation of business and industry, and 60% worried about the government's expanding ownership of private corporations. Also, there is concern about increasing federal and state taxes. That's kind of in the middle of the list of worries as we looked at it, but not at the very top of the list. So the bottom line here is that although Americans are certainly very worried about unemployment and health care and some other things, they're also very worried about the deficit, which of course will increase as the federal government spends more to try to fix the problems. There is less concern, however, on a relative basis on the part of the American public about the fact that the federal government, in trying to fix these problems, is more involved in regulating and more involved in owning private business and industry. I'm Dr. Frank Newport, Editor-in-Chief of the Gallup poll.